Hi everyone, my name is Danica Barnes, and today I'm going to walk you through the user experience design process for our vocab app Wordly. When we started the process, our goal was to design a mobile app that empowers people to learn new vocabulary. So to go about this, we started first by doing research. And the first part of our research was to conduct a competitive analysis of the apps that are currently on the market. And we decided to focus specifically on apps that are flashcard apps. And so the first one that we selected was Flashcards Plus by Chegg, which is an iOS app. Then Quizlet, which is for iOS and Android, and Brainscape, which is for iOS and Android as well. And we learned a lot of interesting things while looking at these apps, but there were a few things that really stood out to us. And the first was that apps succeeded when they included games and also the option to download pre-made decks. Quizlet was really good at including a lot of different games, and this made the process exciting. And actually, all three of the apps had the option to download pre-made decks, which we thought was a good time saver in that you didn't have to type up every single card that you wanted to study. Apps also succeeded when they catered to various different types of learners, meaning visual learners, auditory learners, and tactile learners. And Quizlet had a lot of options for that. It had a voice feature for those that study in an auditory fashion, lots of pictures for visual learners, and a game where you could type in your answers, so that catered to tactile learners. And then apps, finally, they succeeded when they relied on familiar gestures. And Flashcards Plus was really good at this because it had left swiping functionality, which is very common in a lot of apps that users are already familiar with. We found that apps failed when they tried to do too much, and that happened with Quizlet. Its UI got pretty crowded because there were just too many features. And another drawback was when apps didn't have a tutorial or the tutorial was really complicated. And that was the case with both Quizlet and Brainscape. So after the competitive analysis, we then did user interviews where we asked users what helps them when they're studying vocabulary, what makes the process as easy as possible. And we spoke to 3 respondents, Spencer, Jessica, and Cassie. And Spencer said that he really likes having pronunciation help and also visual stimuli. Jessica, considering that she's dyslexic, she doesn't really learn in a visual fashion. She's much more of an auditory learner, so she wanted auditory features in the app. She also wanted social features and games. And Cassie, just like Jessica, wanted social features and also the ability to learn work-related words, which was really interesting because her situation is that she is from the United States and has moved to Denmark and is now working there. And when she moved, she felt that her Danish was very strong, but when she got to the workplace, she realized that there were a lot of work-related words that she didn't understand. And so that's something that she needed help with, and we thought that that was a really interesting insight. And that went into, that played a big role in the creation of our persona, who is named Jennifer Park, and her situation, like Cassie, is that she's from the United States and is moving to Europe. In her case, she's moving to Germany. And so Jennifer has 2 main goals. The first is that she wants to be able to feel very comfortable with the German language when she arrives in Germany. And her second goal is that she needs to be able to speak German well enough to get a new graphic design job once she's settled in the country. And she's facing several challenges in this process. The first is that she has a really busy schedule, and so she doesn't have a lot of time to practice. And the second is that she's doing this mainly by herself, so she can't practice with other people, which makes things difficult. And she's also, just like Jessica from our user interviews, an auditory learner. So the traditional flashcard doesn't really work for her. And then additionally, she's kind of bored with her current study methods and she wants something more exciting. And then, just like Cassie, she needs to be able to feel comfortable with her workplace words. She needs to be able to know the kind of creative terminology that's associated with graphic design, but in German as opposed to English. So we came up with a problem statement where we said that Jennifer needs to be able to quickly learn German because she is moving to Germany and must be comfortable enough with the language to find a new job. So next we moved into the wireframing and prototyping process. And based on the project brief, we knew that the app needed several things. First of all, it was going to need a splash screen. It was going to need an onboarding process that taught users how to use the app. It was going to need the ability for users to either sign up or log into the app. They were also going to need an admin area where they could adjust or, change their email or reset their password. The app, of course, was going to need navigation so that users could get around the app from screen to screen. And it was going to need the option for users to create their own vocabulary decks, and of course the option for users to study those decks. Based on our research, meaning the competitive analysis and our user interviews, we felt that the app should have the option for the app should give users the option to choose the vocab topics that they study, and so that would be, in the case of our persona Jennifer, the ability to study workplace words. And since Jennifer is an auditory learner, we would want the app to have a voice feature. We would also want the app to have games because Jennifer is getting kind of bored with her current study methods. And we would want the app to have a social feature because Jennifer is studying alone and it might be good for her to kind of interact and practice with her peers. And we would want to give the app also the option of downloading pre-made decks. This was something that was really prevalent in the competitive analysis, and it seems like a nice time-saving feature, so we wanted to add that. And so then we went into the usability testing phase, and we recruited 3 participants, Spencer, who was from our user interviews, and then also Dylan and Brittany. And what we wanted them to test out were the app's 4 main features, which was creating a deck, downloading a pre-made deck, studying a deck, and editing a pre-existing deck. And so to do this, we gave the participants 4 tasks. First, they needed to create a flashcard deck, add a pre-made flashcard deck to the home page, study a deck that they downloaded, and add an additional card to a deck that they already had. And so with the first task, creating a new flashcard deck, it was fairly successful, but the users ran into 2 main issues. The first was that on the second adding a card screen, the back arrow sent users to the language selection screen. In actuality, it should have sent them to the back of card number 1. So that was a fairly easy fix. What we did was we changed the destination of that button to the back of card number 1 instead of the language selection area. The second issue that users had was regarding the return button. They felt that if they pressed the return button, it would return them to the previous screen. And that's not the case. That button is actually more of an enter button. It enters the text that you've just typed into the flashcard that you're creating. So really that was kind of a terminology issue, and so we decided to change the name of that button to Save, which we thought would be a little bit more clear. And then we also made 2 additional changes to this screen that didn't come up in the usability testing, but we still found, or we still felt were important. The first was adding a Done button to the upper right of the screen, just to give users the ability to exit out of the process whenever they needed to. And the second thing that we added was to give each card a number, such as, card 1, card 2, card 3, card 4, so that users knew where they were in the progression of the deck at any given time, and they wouldn't get lost. The second task was to add a pre-made flashcard deck to the home page, and this was a task that users really struggled with, and actually in some instances they were not able to complete this task, and we had to kind of show them the proper way to do that. The main issue here was that the way you add a pre-made deck is to press the download button, and this didn't make sense to the users. They recognized that this downward arrow was a download button, but they didn't equate downloading with adding a pre-existing deck. That connection wasn't there for them. So we decided we needed to kind of change up that icon, and so what we did was instead we changed it to a magnifying glass, as in like you're searching for a new deck. And we thought this would be a good idea because this is the icon that all 3 apps in our competitive analysis used, and so we felt pretty confident that this would be a good choice that had been well tested by other people. And so then also we updated the onboarding screen just to add in the words pre-made decks in there. Those words were absent from that screen initially, and we thought adding that in would kind of remind users that yes, the magnifying glass is where you access those decks that already exist. So just clarifying the onboarding screen. The other issue that came up with this task was that since users didn't really know what to do, they just kind of were clicking wherever, and they clicked the meetup button, which unfortunately led them to a screen that was missing a back button, so they got stuck there. And so that was a very easy fix. We just simply added in a back button so that people would not get stuck. For the third task, that was study a deck that you just downloaded. And this one went fairly well. The users were able to do it, but they kind of got tripped up with some of the navigation. The way that the navigation functioned in this prototype was that if users tapped the front of a card, it would flip over, revealing the back of the card. And then if they left swiped from the back of the card, it would take them to the next card, card 2 or 3 or 4 in the process. And this wasn't always clear to users, and so what we decided to do was totally redesign how this navigation works. And so what we did was we kept the tapping functionality in place, but we kind of extended it. So when you tap the front of the card, it reveals the back of the card. But then also when you tap the back of the card, it flips again, back to the front. So the tapping is just flipping. And then what we did was we extended the swiping capabilities. So basically, if you left swipe, it takes you to the next card. You would go from card 2 to card 3 in that instance. Or if you right swiped, that would take you backwards in the process. You'd go from card 2 to card 1. And to make that even more clear, we added in these little arrows to kind of remind people about the swiping capability. And we also added an exit button in the upper right just to make sure that people could get out of this process whenever they wanted to and go back to the home page. We didn't really have very many new issues, or really any new issues with Task 4 at all, but we did notice a few things about the onboarding process. The first of which is that we included the word press on our onboarding screens, and so that caused users to want to press the navigation buttons at the bottom of the screen. And that was a problem because those navigation buttons are inactive during the onboarding, just for simplicity's sake. So they were tapping and nothing happened. And then the other issue with the onboarding screens was that there were 2 different plus buttons introduced, and that was kind of confusing. And so what we did to resolve this was, first of all, we cut out the word press from our onboarding screens, just to kind of avoid that confusion. And then as far as the plus button issue, we decided to change one of the plus icons so that we wouldn't have any duplicate icons. And so we added in this pencil icon, which is for when you want to edit your deck. And it's actually a much better icon than a plus symbol anyway, because the plus symbol just implies adding, but really that with that button you can do much more than just add. You can also delete or go in and change the text. So that's why we settled on the pencil icon. And then also we added the pencil icon to the deck homepage screen, just to continue that image throughout. So now that the first round of usability testing is done, it's time to think about what's next in the process. The obvious next step is to perform more usability tests on our new updated prototypes. After that, we'll make necessary improvements and work on a high fidelity prototype, which then we'll perform more usability tests on, and then we'll make any necessary improvements and move on to the UI design, which then we'll keep iterating and testing on. I found that this whole process was really informative, and there were a few things that really stuck out to me. The first was it's very important to get the phrasing of your onboarding screens and the design of your button icons right, because they really have a huge impact on how a user understands an app. So that was a good learning experience. And also, it was interesting to see that users really kind of struggled with aspects of the app that I wasn't anticipating. I thought that there were going to be different areas that were going to trip them up. So just really shows the importance of usability testing as a whole. And in terms of things that I found helpful, I really liked creating the user flows. I feel like that really helps me start thinking about the app's architecture in a positive way. And I think that the last thing that I did that was helpful, that wasn't really explicitly part of any exercise, was just to write out a list of what the app's needs would be, both in terms of the project brief and in terms of the research that I did. And that really helped me get a clear picture of what kind of screens I would need when I was doing the wireframing. So I really learned a lot from that. And I hope that you all learned a lot from watching this presentation and learned about the user experience design for the Wordly app. Thanks for listening.